Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Changing Times and I am Dr. Zubair Ghori. Pakistani Stock Exchange has been doing some excellent work in the last 3 to 4 years or time or so. These are 3 different stock exchanges in Islamabad, Karachi and Lahore, but now recently, according to a decision that has been made, all these 3 stock exchanges have been merged into one and they are now called Pakistan Stock Exchange. Why this decision was required, what could be the far-reaching impacts of this decision, and why 3 different stock exchanges cannot work at different places. Why do we need an identity in one Pakistan Stock Exchange? Although there are some issues related with the taxation system, related with the development of the stock exchange, and also getting the foreign direct investment into Pakistan, but this decision has its own pros and cons. And we have to see that such decisions are good for our economy or not. The Pakistani economy, which has been doing some good acts in the last 3 to 4 years, but we have to see that this good economy is also translating its results into the financial numbers that can be depicted or represented through the stock exchange number as well, although they may not be the true representation. We have to understand the stock market works on its own dynamics and may not be directly related with the economic performance of the country, but still it has some effects with it. So this is today's discussion, and let me introduce you to the guest I have. I have Mr. Faheem Sardar Sahab. He is heading an asset management company. Faheem Sahab, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we are also joined by Mr. Salman Haider Sheikh. He is also heading an asset management company in the private sector. Salman Sheikh Sahab, thank you very much for coming. Let me start with you, Faheem. Why it was required to have this merger? What was the problem going on in 3 different entities working in tandem with each other?
Well, basically, what we've seen is that this is not something new. It was supposed to be done approximately, it's been talked about for the past 15 years. And there was a lot of fragmentation. You had 3 stock exchanges which were virtually identical, but one had more liquidity, the others 2 had less liquidity. Orders were being executed mostly on the Karchi Stock Exchange, originating from the whole of Pakistan.
Okay.
And it's more a question of evolution, I would say, but the objective is to basically defragment the market, to make it one, to make it clear, to bring in less confusion, to bring in more clarity, to sort of show the investor that there is one stock exchange, there is one listing place where companies can go to list, there is one price for, let's say, a specific share. Earlier, what we had like 3 different prices.
There were great variation in the prices?
Not that much, but it was enough to cause a bit of a discrepancy. But that itself was not the right thing to do, to have 3 identical stock exchanges. But what is required is to have specialization in stock exchanges. That is a big issue that was frankly not addressed.
Now, what is please educate us in this regard. What's the common practice in other parts of the world? Do they have 2, 3 different stock exchanges within one country?
Yes, they do. Throughout the world, you basically have, let's start from the basics. A stock exchange helps raise capital for businesses for long-term periods.
Okay.
Banking is a short-term thing. Stock exchanges is a long-term thing. We see stock exchanges in every single country, but what we have noticed is that every single country, and we can prove this through studying their evolution, every single country has had a specific stock exchange for a specific purpose. For example, if we take the American example, you've got the Dow, you've got the NASDAQ, you've got certain regional exchanges. Dow is different from NASDAQ. NASDAQ is more technology oriented. Dow is different, it's more industrial oriented. Those waters do not mix.
Okay.
They stay separate.
So there's no differentiation in terms of their geographic location, in terms of their industry bases or the sectors that they are delivering?
They do differ when it comes to industry, but they're absolutely available for everybody throughout the country. In Pakistan, one of the biggest issues that came about was the replication of the same structure across different places. The government has very aggressively tried to fix this problem by having one stock exchange, which has its own merits. But then there are some issues as well.
We'll come back to the issues. Coming back to Sheikh Sahab. Sheikh Sahab, if it was on the cards for the last 10, 15 years, what was the problem? Why weren't we doing it if it was so good, such an advisable thing?
Well, coming back to your first question, I'll start from there. I mean, stock exchange is a pool of liquidity, right? So if you have if something is going to serve the same purpose, and you divide that up into three fragments, and serving the same purpose, I think that wasn't doing the job.
Okay.
Having said that, if Karachi was, looking at the pool of liquidity, Karachi had the most amount of liquidity. Stock exchange being a pool of liquidity, if you combine them together and call it Pakistan, it becomes a selling story to the rest of the world. It becomes a better story.
Okay.
And you being part of the emerging markets, I think that is where we needed to show us a signal front to the market, to the rest of the world.
True.
So that's one point.
Or wasn't that the case? Only
Second-
the Karchi Stock Exchange was our showcase?
And that was the issue. You see, the second question was the issue. The issue is that here are three brothers, one being the eldest, and the other two their businesses didn't do that well according to what their initial plans. Let's call it that. But if, as a layman or as an investor, if I look at it from an outside perspective, and I have to go to three exchanges, I want quick liquidity, I want quick trade, I want quick execution for my trade. Let's call it that. So if Karachi is offering me that, then I may not be looking at the other exchanges if it's giving me the same shares or the same companies, unless it's a whole separate ball game. Then if the commodity exchange is separate, or the option exchange, or call it the SME exchange, then they would serve different purposes. Here they were serving the same purpose, so it made perfect sense to actually have a merged entity,
Okay.
locally and
No,
internationally.
then why was it taking such a long time? There were some problems with as far as the government was concerned, or the investment parties, or the people who are actually running these stock exchanges?
I think that's the main issue. I mean, you have certain stakeholders, and that's where the issue starts. You had very different. First of all, there are geographical issues. Yes, there's the culture issues. Then you have stakeholders, which are very, very different for all three exchanges. Yes, there were some certain members who were members of the Karachi Stock Exchange, and also Lahore and Islamabad, but those were few in numbers. So bringing together or buying a company out, whether it's a merger of equals or an acquisition, takes a long amount of time. Here you have 400 brokers now.
Yeah.
So you have about 400 partners who you were supposed to sit together on a table and agree upon certain conditions of a merged entity.
Okay.
So it was a cumbersome task, and I think we must commend the current administration for doing a good job at it.
Okay. Faheem Sir, for the laymen who are watching this program, is it not an issue of accessibility? Well, I'm sitting in Islamabad, I want to have more access to the Islamabad Stock Exchange. Why? Presumably, this Pakistan Stock Exchange has mostly based in Karachi now. So why I have to contact them, although there is an internet-based connections are available that are quite good, but isn't it the kind of belongingness that I have in Islamabad or in Lahore?
Well, that belongingness is finished now because it's the Pakistan Stock Exchange. That's what we belong to now. But yes, well, I guess this thing sort of came up during the process of the merger. I saw it with my own eyes that the administration and the government was thinking of how can you not have 400 brokers now, because the smaller, medium-sized brokers have outreach across Pakistan, not one particular, set of brokers. Everybody has their own reach. When you put it collectively, so it's supposed to have a multiplying effect. The sense of belonging is not there anymore. There's a new belonging. So we belong to something else that belongs to us. But it has to be taken forward. And as Salman said, this is the selling point. We're trying to sell it to the world that this is the stock exchange that gives you 20+% return every year. Now start selling it to the world. So even the name is obviously quite apt, Pakistan Stock Exchange. But I repeat, there are issues that need to be looked into.
Okay, we'll coming back to the issues. But for the moment, what are the benefits that have come out of this synergy?
Okay. Well, if there is synergy, we have to sort of wait for the dust to settle, and we need to see where the chips have fallen for everybody. Because every single member in Pakistan has given up something for or the other. For example, we're a member of the Karachi Stock Exchange and the Islamabad Stock Exchange, so we've seen both sides of the picture. We had to give up something to get something. Karachi had to give up something to get something. The Islamabad and Lahore stock exchanges had to give up their entity to become part of the Pakistan Stock Exchange. So,
And now it's primarily based in Karachi, or it has its regional office in Lahore and Islamabad as well?
It's based in Karachi. There will be regional offices here, but at the end of the day, you sort of have a head office where the liquidity is. But it is advisable to have a different approach to that. That's a separate issue. Won't get into that right now. This synergy, as you said, we'll see how that sort of comes up. The fact of the matter is, for an investor,
But you must have some projections on this. What could be the long-term
yes,
benefits?
we do have our assessments. We'll just come to that. Basically, the best thing for an investor, local and international, is now that there is one face.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about 3 stock exchanges. If I want to have a certain company listed, I know that there's one stock exchange that I have to go to. I don't have to worry about 3 stock exchanges.
Okay. Let me go to Sheikh Saab. Sheikh Saab, what's the opportunity cost of this merger?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the overall, risk versus reward ratios or the benefit analysis, I think the benefits certainly outweigh the risks. So, having said that, I think it's a great opportunity. I mean, again, as Faheem said, if you have a local businessman who wants to raise further liquidity, there's one exchange. You know where to go to. You can go to a broker or an investment house in Islamabad, and you can get listed on one exchange. If you let's say you're an institution sitting in Paris or in London, and you want to trade in the Pakistani markets, now you'll be easily connected through your terminals to one market, and you don't have to look at different markets for different prices.
Okay.
So you know that you're dealing with one exchange, and you got one connection, and I think that'll increase. As I said before, stock exchange is a pool of liquidity. So if you increase the liquidity, the exchange would certainly be better.
What about the brokers? Many people are saying that it is the big parties game, the big fish game, the big brokerage houses which have access everywhere throughout Pakistan, and they have regional offices there. They are getting more benefits because they have more entrenched themselves into the regional markets as well. But the smaller brokers who are sitting in Lahore and Islamabad, they are just out of the thing.
I mean, I would disagree to that. I mean, if you look at any industry, the bigger players, let's suppose you control 10 to 15% of an industry size, but you've built that size over time. You've invested your assets, and you've invested your capital, and you've invested your manpower. So you've attained a certain number of let's say market share. You look at any industry. So if an industry is supposed to benefit, whether it's from the economics or from the government policies or anything else, then
it's economic Darwinism. You have
I think
to
it's very, very simple. I think
that.
it applies to every single industry. So you can't just say single out the stock brokers per se.
Yeah.
If the larger brokers benefit more, I guess they're the largest
Of course,
investors as well.
we need diversity also. We need more people coming into
Absolutely.
the market. We
I
just
think
want to monopolize this for the 4 or 5 persons.
Well, no, that's not the case. The diversification has actually increased. I think the number was around 200 for the Karchi Stock Exchange. Now you have close to 400 brokers. So the diversification has increased. More players from the regional markets would actually now be looking at the PSX to become members and to maybe acquire and become a member. So I think that now you have 400 brokers. So having just by looking at the numbers, the diversification.
Okay. Faheem, your take on this? Is there any issue with the diversification or the gap between a smaller broker or the punters, if you want to comment on that, if you like this phrase? How are they thinking about this?
Do I have to comment on that?
Yes, why not?
Okay, sure. Now, the fact of the matter is, look, as I said, we have to wait for the dust to settle. We have to see where the chips have fallen. And this is not a very, cut and dry situation, because I have never seen in my career macro structures and microstructures being changed at the same time. And this is not something which is advisable. I mean, I've studied the Indian system, I've studied the Australian system. We knew what happened in Singapore. We know how things are done in America. But I have never seen macro and microstructures being changed at the same time in such a short span of time. Here it was 6 months. So what was the rush? Why do it so quickly? Why not set up an SME exchange? That's where I come from. Islamabad and Lahore, I personally feel, should have become an SME exchange, restructure the system, get it done. Why? Because you need a different specialization. That's where I started off from. And yes, I mean, there is diversification. We have to understand that, but we have to let things settle down, because right now, what's happening in the PSX is you've got 3 kinds of brokers under one regime. Now, I'll say
What are those?
I'll explain that. You've got 3 different applications or laws under one roof. How can that? For how long will that be tolerated? For example, Islamabad and Lahore members ex-Islamabad and ex-Lahore members have been allowed a certain time period to bring up their capitalization, their standards, and their setups and structures, and so on and so forth. So
At par with the Karachi one.
at par with the other ones. And by the way, this is going to affect the old Karachi members as well. So we have to see, I'm repeating myself, we have to see what happens when the dust settles.
Okay, what are the issues that you want to? One of those is that you have just identified, that proper system has not been adopted in this.
No, I think it's been a very broad-based, it's an open arms policy, so to speak, by the government. But we have to look at certain core issues. Why has the Pakistani Stock Exchange not developed as aggressively as, let's say, I hate to say this, Bangladesh? Bangladesh has got something like millions of account holders. We've got officially 200,000 and something, of which less than half are active. Why are people so scared of not the stock exchange, but now of the government? Why, when they open an account, why are they so scared? Because of the taxation structures, because of the regulatory issues, because of the unnecessary oversight. The stock exchange, we have to bear in mind, is the most regulated, documented sector or industry in Pakistan, and that becomes the first thing to be taxed. Now, people are being progressively taxed. I wouldn't say progressively, exponentially taxed as time passes by. How is that good for the stock exchange? If we don't believe this, we just have to look at the numbers. Why are other countries' stock exchanges participants increasing? I'm talking about investors. I'm not talking about members.
Okay.
The members aspect is something else. These are hardcore. These are real issues we need to look at. Over-regulation, unnecessary taxation. You bring in the people who are not part of this business, you bring them in. How do you bring them in? You bring them in through the banking system. That's not happening in Pakistan.
Okay, let me go to Sheikh Saab. Sheikh Saab, do you agree with the issues that he has been raising? And if there are these cumbersome issues that may be hindering the progress of this Pakistan Stock Exchange, as we now call it, then why is it registering such good results?
Exactly. I mean, I would absolutely agree with the issues that he has highlighted. But at the same time, let's look at the positive side of the story. I mean, the stock exchange was trading around 5,800 levels in 2008 crash or crisis, and we've seen up to 36,000 of the index levels. Currently, it's trading around 31,000. So having said that, I think as long as you increase the pool, I represent the asset management industry, which is the mutual funds and so on and so forth. And now we're heading towards real estate, trust management, and also private equity funds, which we're looking to launch. So having said that, I think if you have one pool of liquidity, and here are funds which would then again be listed in the future onto this one exchange, you would have even foreign players, and with the CPEC in mind and with the Chinese inflows, we would be structuring debt equity funds and listing them on the exchange as well. So and raising further liquidity from the exchange. So I think this also comes in handy at the right time. And so yes, there's a lot of positivity as well at the same time. Yes, these issues are there. And they'll remain, whether you look at the
How
mature
far do you
markets.
agree that this sector is overtaxed? And it's an easy cash cow for the government to milk as and when they want.
I would agree to that. I mean, naturally, you've just looked at the one of the schemes that the government just announced, and the other segments of the society which are taxed heavily, they certainly are not happy with it. Naturally, if you have, let's say, a few percentage of the entire population that has to take the burden
I'm not
of
asking about the
taxation.
comparison. Then you have this heart burning that, okay, this sector isn't paying, this sector isn't paying, this sector isn't, why should I pay? This is the comparison. But as far as looking at the industry, and if you compare it with the international markets, how far they are taxed, how regressive their tax regimes are.
Well, in Pakistani Stock Exchange, if you look at my perspective, having worked on Wall Street for 10 years, the taxation in the US is much higher than what we pay in Pakistan today on the capital gain side.
Okay.
But let's not compare apple with orange.
Yeah, of course not.
Naturally. So we look at
But if, as Faheem was saying, we are registering 22% or 23%, or in some cases 28%. After the taxation, isn't it good enough to
I think Faheem's point is maybe a little different. That if you are taxing it at this level, where you have a very small base of investors in the market to begin with, first increase the number of investors and then enhance the tax rates or bring it in.
Okay.
Sequentially.
That should be exponential, as he was referring to.
Exactly. So if you have a sequential tax, let's say regime, and you bring it in, but the base is so small that you're actually discouraging new investors to come in.
Okay, here comes the question of base. I'm sorry, I keep on asking the same question again and again and again. What is the base of a Pakistani stock market if it's registering such high good results? And whenever we talk about the Pakistani economy and the Pakistani economists and the financial experts, they keep on saying that we are drudging along. Okay, we are barely there. We have about 4% growth. Industry is not registering growth. Our exports are going down. Imports are increasing. Where the hell is money coming from?
Well, basically, when we talk about this 20% plus growth, it's coming from the private sector companies listed on the stock exchange. It's not coming from the government. Well, of course, government companies are also a huge part of
No,
the
I'm,
stock.
I'm talking about the GDP growth. That
Of course.
has nothing to do with the government.
Basically, there is a de-link between our stock exchange and our economy. We have to have a parallel structure where your economy is represented by the stock exchange. Now, evidence of this is that your stock exchange in comparison to banking there is no absolutely comparison. In other countries that we like to quote in our examples, it's like a 60-40 comparison. Now, our stock exchange has to go through a massive evolution. That's what we're talking about, fixing core issues and moving forward. But our economy is basically not represented by the stock exchange, unfortunately.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is time for a very short break, but when we come back, we'll be talking in more detail about the future prospects of the Pakistan Stock Exchange and how the international investors can be lured into the Pakistani market. Please stay with us. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about the Pakistan Stock Exchange and the merger of three stock exchanges. What are the cost and benefit analysis in this regard? Let me continue my discussion with Salman Sheikh. Salman Sheikh, what are the future projections? We have taken a big step, although as the previous discussion that we had, they had so many hiccups for the 10-15 years, still have many issues. So where do you see Pakistani Stock Exchange in the next 1 year or so?
I won't comment about the let's say where the exchange would be in terms of numbers itself. But overall, as a pool of liquidity, since it's going to grow larger in terms of its base, and more companies would look at it more seriously.
Okay.
And not local companies, and they would want to get listed, whether it's initial listing, whether they want to raise further capital for secondaries, whether there are new products that you can easily now launch. So all the brokers or all the companies, the investment banks, the asset management companies, and so on and so forth, would come up with different products. And when they come up with certain other financial products to raise liquidity or into their products, they would look at one exchange. So that also, there would be more innovation. You would have, as I mentioned before, just the asset management side. We would look at, to raise liquidity from one pool, and to lure in the investors from the foreign markets. Not just the Chinese investors that are looking to come into Pakistan, but also the European investors and the Middle Eastern investors that we've been talking to. I think this would give them a better opportunity at least.
Okay, you're talking about the listing of the new companies into the stock market. What is the roughly comparison of the companies that are registered with the Pakistani Security and Exchange Commission and registration with the Pakistan Stock Exchange? What is the roughly percentage?
I mean, again, that is a very dismal figure, yes. Overall, if you look at the Pakistani, the number of companies that are registered, the number of companies doing well and shying away from coming onto the stock exchange. And as Faheem rightly mentioned before, the taxation and some of the other issues are the main reason, or some of the obstacles as they see it. Because some of the private sector companies are not as highly regulated as the stock exchanges. So when you come into the ambit of the stock exchange, and I'll give you a perspective from our end, the asset management companies, each and every mutual fund is listed entity. So for the requirements, not just the audit requirements, the listing requirements obviously are manifolds. Then if you have a private fund, for example. So having said that, since it's a highly regulated industry, there needs to be an incentive for more companies to get listed. And until and unless you have the incentive and you broaden the base, the other, in terms of earning from it through taxation and other so on and so forth, they should give them an ease. One other thing I would highlight here, I spoke again about the private equity funds. I think the government should introduce at least a 10-year tax holiday for the foreign investors to come into Pakistan, bring in FDI through the private equity funds that we're going to launch in the future.
Okay. Fine, sir. Coming back to this point of this Pakistani investors or the Pakistani companies getting registered themselves in the stock exchange, apart from this tax regime and apart from the work, the auditor work or the number work that they have to do, what are the other factors? Maybe some cultural factors. Maybe they are more complacent that they don't want to do an extra work and get listed into the company.
Culture is one, excuse me, culture is one aspect of it because many people are running their family businesses with the help of banks. They don't think that they need to come into the stock exchange to have more owners stand next to them. And as you know, as Salman said, basically they have their own way of doing things. Now, the Pakistani Stock Exchange, we just have to go back, is not technically representing the economy.
Okay.
It should. That is why in other countries you see the stock exchange, it's an evolutionary product. It's not something that's taken off the shelf and registered and then started off. Even if you look at, we like to talk about the Bombay Stock Exchange as a frame of reference. I mean, I started my career studying the Bombay Stock Exchange. Even they've got, for example, the Bombay Stock Exchange has more than 5,000 companies listed on the BSE. KSE has 550, that's like 1/10. Okay. And there's a huge
That has something to do with the population?
It has something to do with the population, but it also has something to do with the way business is being done. They're slightly more savvy about doing business. They realize the benefits of a stock exchange. But the government of India does promote its own capital market. Now in Pakistan, what incentive, as Salman said, what incentive is there to come onto the stock exchange aside from the fact that you're stuck, you can't get a bank loan, you have to go to the stock exchange. If you can get a bank loan, nobody's going to come to the stock exchange. 550 companies listed on our PSX representing Pakistan it's not doing justice. We've got 200,000, 250,000 investors in Pakistan domestically registered in Pakistan. That doesn't do justice. We should have millions of investors. We should have thousands of companies on the stock exchange. And looking forward, we have to realize that every institution, every sector, every economy does have its own culture. I agree with you, but it has to be now molded in the right way, in the right direction, because it's such a big. This is a huge step. Yeah. It's a huge step. It has been done. It needs to be commended where it should be commended, and now it needs to be very carefully handled because now the product is there. You have one face to show to the investors across the earth, and many investors across the earth do understand the benefits of investing in Pakistan because they know many of our companies have outgrown companies in Germany and Sweden, for example. Now this thing is they know about this, so that's good for us, but it has to be now carefully handled and taken in the right direction because a big step has been taken.
Okay, there's a parallel development apart from this, the merger of the Pakistani Stock Exchange. There has been some crackdown against some of the brokerage houses that are dealing with different types of entities in Karchi Stock Exchange. One of them is AKD, of course. Where do you see this thing going on? Do you think it's a good development as far as the transparency of the stock exchange is concerned, or many people are saying that it's a malafide?
If you look at any such instance in Pakistan, I think the first response is that it should be done across the board. That's the same response that I would give you. It should be done across the board. Just from looking at the news items that I've looked at, there was a research report, and on the basis of a research report, you've taken in some professionals. And having said that, if you are going to, let's say, penalize someone's career or a company just on the basis of a research report, I think that's not enough. That's at the surface, it doesn't look to be a very, very strong case. But there may be more to it, which I don't know yet. But at the surface of it, being a professional, I think the professionals from the industry should at least raise their voice.
Yeah, does it have the potential of scaring away the future investors?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, again, if you're looking at some of, as I said before, if you've got professionals of like chartered accountants, FCAs, they're involved, and if somebody's taken away without much evidence, or let's suppose it doesn't get proven after 3 months, then yes, the investors would also shy away, especially the foreign investors. And being a big house, and I'm not here representing any house, but any house, if it's a bigger industry player getting tainted, then naturally the foreign inflow would take a toll.
Okay, but Faheem sir, do you like to comment on this or before we go on?
Well, basically, any market, it has to have justice and fair play. If you look at any big market on earth, and I'm saying across the board, it goes in every single direction. Justice has to be justice. If something was wrong, it has to be fixed. This applies to everybody. Should be a rule of law. Now, I don't know what the facts of the situation are, and since I have spent time in forensics in the stock market, I am able to see that there is something, whether something is real or not. So, but I want to focus on the principle. If you look at any big market on earth which is functioning properly or it's growing year on year, you have to. It is fun to watch how they do justice. Do they dispense with justice or not? If it's done in a good way, you suddenly see the market growing more and more.
Okay. But we do understand that it has to be justice and fair play everywhere, and if there has been something into this, it should be done quickly as possible so that the name of that brokerage house is not tainted anymore. Okay, coming back to the foreign investors, and we are talking about this is a great stock exchange. It has been doing good in the region and maybe one of the top 10s in the world as well. What are the chances of the foreign investors that are coming into this?
I think chances are brighter now because you have. Well, let's just say there's more clarity for the foreign investor when he or she or it wants to invest in Pakistan. They have one window to look at, the Pakistan Stock Exchange. And instead of having 3 different avenues, they have one. For example, the Istanbul Bursa is reportedly interested in buying the Pakistan Stock Exchange. So, but at what price, I mean, that's another debate. But it is interesting to note that there is some interest developing already. But of course, we're not just talking about the PSX here. We're talking about Pakistan. If you have one face, one future, you basically can funnel things more easily. Now, with CPEC coming in, you've got other countries, they're willing to bring in some investments into Pakistan. This should be a good conduit.
Okay. But let me go to Sheikh Saab on this. There are future prospects that are coming into play. But the point here is that if the Pakistani investors and the Pakistani companies are not jumping into the fray, then how do you expect the international players? You have referred to the Chinese investors, but what about the European, what about the Americans, what about the Japanese and the Malaysian investors? They might be interested in the Pakistani market.
I mean, as I said before, since I worked on Wall Street for a good 10 years, so yes, the few issues that the foreign investor looks at are not just the currency devaluation issues, the economic, the political risk, the geopolitical risk, and so on and so forth. So in order to bring in the foreign investors, in my personal opinion, we can't just offer them, here's the entire market, and why don't you come in? You can't just do a roadshow like that. I think we need to structure our products. We need to have structured, individualized products given to the Middle Eastern investors, the European investors. They should be very, very separate. For example,
so you mean to say you must have some niche markets for individual buyers?
At our institution, we are developing certain Sharia compliant, maybe enhancing the credit side of the portfolio for the institutions.
Halal is the word now.
Well, we work in the Middle Eastern clients, whether it's Dubai Exchange or other, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and so on and so forth, or Bahrain-based institutions, and you need to naturally look at Sharia compliant products. Underlying instruments and everything else would be similar, but it's the
whose forte or whose problem is this? Is it the government who has to do something in this regard, or it is the members of the stock exchange or the contributors who have to do this structuralization in these respects?
I think both, but the main responsibility lies with the private sector, the institutions.
No, are we that much futuristic?
Financial institutions. If it's the financial institutions that would take the lead, they're not only the owners in the stock exchange, but they're the stakeholders, right? The government being the largest stakeholder who's in the listed entities of the stock exchange, that's also one portion, but also the government needs to bring in FDI and the FPI and so on and so forth, those numbers are also quite dismal at this point in time, so we need to increase them as well. Okay. So if you have structured products, and the government side, you can address the credit quality overall, the political risk, the geopolitical risk, and so on and so forth, and also the currency side. If you can give a hedge on the currency, then a lot of other investors would come into Pakistan.
Okay, Faheem Sahab, do we have the capacity to handle this increasing number, and are we sufficiently technologically advanced, and the people are having hands-on experience to dealing with the international markets investors coming into Pakistan?
Yes, we do, because Pakistan's, for example, banking structure is one of the best on earth. Our stock markets have been one of the best performers on earth. We have the technology, we have the ability. We just need to sort of sit down at the same table.
When you say that Pakistan has one of the best banking sectors, but whenever I go to a banking institution, the ease of use that I have with my credit card or my smartphone, I don't see it in Pakistan. I still follow the same checkbook. I don't have those vending machines available in the market. I don't have that much freedom of my movement that is available with the international markets. And how can you fear that Pakistan is one of the best banking systems?
Well, because if you look at the evolutionary structure, what Pakistan has done in, for example, 15 years, since 2000 onwards, and that's like 15 years. And I mean, if you see the development of how our mega banks changed into more efficient structures. I mean, if you sort of juxtapose that with what...
No, that's okay. That's okay. We have seen that evolution.
So, I mean, their evolution...
But when you're comparing with the world, where do we stand?
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. But we have to sort of take things with a pinch of salt, because those countries, A, have not experienced war in the past 15 years. They have not experienced many other things, and they had enough time to evolve. We're doing it in an accelerated fashion. That's why we still adhere to some of the older structures like checkbooks and stuff like that, which is fine. But what I'm saying is the trajectory and this momentum is good.
No, I'm talking about the ease of doing business. We have seen a phenomenal growth in this mobile phone transactions.
Absolutely.
If we can do that much in the last 5-6 years, why can't we do in the banking industry? Why the cell phones are taking lead in this regard? I'm sorry, I'm going a bit...
No, fair enough. I mean, the fact of the matter is that they are linked to the banking industry. That is a certain extension of the banking industry, and it's like two roads coming from different sides to the same area. You have to just sort of look at it from both perspectives.
Okay. One last thing, Sheikh Saab, what are the future prospects in this coming concluding remarks for Pakistani Stock Exchange? Good, bad, mixed?
No, the future looks very bright. If I look at the CPEC and the overall investments that are coming into Pakistan, and if we can bring in some equity investors as well, not only the infrastructure products, but overall the energy and the other sectors, the future looks very bright.
Okay, thank you very much, Faheem Saab, and thank you very much, Salman. Sheikh Saab, for sharing your valuable thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all from us tonight. You can share your comments and feedback on facebook.com/Dr. Zubair Ghori official, and my Twitter handle is Dr. Zubair Ghori. That's all from us tonight. A very good night. Allah Hafiz.
Fertilization idea between researcher, development practitioner, and